This conference will now be recorded.
The objectives for tonight's webinar are to equip scholars with tools to navigate the college funding process, share tips on researching and applying for scholarships, and to share relevant COVID-19 economic impacts to financial aid. We would like to share some housekeeping rules for this evening. A reminder that all lines will be muted and will remain muted until the question and answer session following the end of the webinar. We ask that you utilize the chat function to post questions and to ask for assistance with any technical issues. And we also recommend that you're prepared with paper and pen so that you can take plenty of notes on the information being provided this evening. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated is the first Greek letter organization founded by African American women on January 15, 1908 on the campus of Howard University. Under the leadership of its current international president, Dr. Glenda Baskin Glover, the program theme for the 2018-2022 years is Exemplifying Excellence Through Sustainable Service. Target 1 of the program theme is HBCU for Life, a call to action, with the signature program being #CAP, which stands for the College Admissions Process. This program theme is designed to assist students to enter college by providing a hands-on approach. We would like to thank the 5 sponsoring chapters of Alpha Kappa Alpha for sponsoring this webinar series and the representatives from the associated chapters: Gamma Delta Omega, Gamma Gamma Omega, Lambda Omega, Lambda Omega Omega, and Psi Psi Omega chapters. We also would like to welcome any members of other Greek letter organizations who may be in attendance this evening, and we would like to recognize you by having you type your name, chapter, and organization of affiliation so we can recognize you. As stated previously, this is our 3rd webinar program in the series of programs, and we have 3 more that are scheduled for the future in the coming weeks. August 20th will be a webinar on writing essays. August 27th, applying to colleges, and we will end it with a general college session and information on HBCUs, which will occur on September 24th. So please make note of those dates and mark them on your calendars. As you can see, our agenda for this evening is packed, and we have a plethora of topics on the college funding process that we will cover tonight, from understanding the cost of attending college, to determining your financial needs, up to searching and applying for scholarships. And those are just a sample of the topics that will be addressed. We will conclude tonight's program with a question and answer period with our presenters, and we encourage you to stick around for that period. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our presenters for this evening. Our presenters for this evening have co-authored the primary reference for tonight's webinar, and that reference is College Funding Strategies, I Wish Someone Had Told Me. Ms. Nicole T. Cole, MBA, has worked nationally with families to create mostly late-stage college funding plans since 2009 as a certified college funding planning specialist and owner of the College Money Team. Ms. Cole earned her master's in business administration and finance in 1997 at the Northwestern University Kellogg Graduate School of Management. Before graduating from the University of Maryland, College Park in 1991, she worked as a peer counselor in the Office of Student Financial Aid. Ms. Cole has presented for numerous organizations to educate parents and scholars on the college funding and financial aid process. She has worked directly with hundreds of families to create and implement custom college funding plans. Dr. Christie Murray. There's over 26 years of college planning and funding expertise to help scholars get accepted into college and graduate debt-free as the owner of Invest in Others, LLC. After speaking nationally to thousands of scholars, parents, educators, and organizational leaders, she wrote this book to share how to fund college by offering proven college funding strategies to reduce or eliminate college debt. Dr. Murray has also authored College Planning Strategies I Wish Someone Had Told Me. In 1998, she graduated from Hampton University, earning a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering, and she holds a doctorate in business administration from the University of Phoenix. Dr. Murray received multiple college scholarships, and she committed to help her sons and other scholars do the same. Please help me in welcoming our presenters this evening, Ms. Nicole Cole and Dr. Christie Murray. Ms. Cole.
If you're speaking, dear, you're on mute.
My apologies. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar tonight, and hope that you will get a wealth of information to help you successfully fund 4 years or more, if needed, of your college education. Tonight, while we have 10 college funding strategies outlined in our book, College Funding Strategies I Wish Someone Had Told Me, we'll be focusing on just a few. So for today's presentation, I'll focus on the strategies that help you understand the cost of college, how to calculate your out-of-pocket responsibility, and then how need is determined. And then Dr. Murray will take you through scholarship search and application strategies. Next slide. So while there are generally 4 stages of college funding, tonight we're focusing on the late stage for 2 reasons. One, the CAP program is a program that helps support mainly students who are in the junior and senior year, so the very late stage of college funding, and because many of the juniors and seniors are actively getting ready to, or especially the seniors, getting ready to enter the college financial aid application process. And so this will help you real time to start understanding where you haven't planned and what things you need to do to plan and to get through this process for starting your college funding moving forward. Next slide. Okay, that's out of place. It's okay. Okay, this, in any case, all right, so first, applying for financial aid. So we start with the FAFSA application. There's actually 2 financial aid applications that you can that you'll be needing to, that you might be needing to complete. For sure, while Dr. Christie is changing up the slide deck, because we actually changed it. For sure, you would be completing the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. And some might be also completing the what's called the CSS profile, which is a financial aid application that some public schools and some private schools require to help determine your financial need. So the first thing that, first part of understanding what might be your responsibility for paying for college is knowing the cost of attendance for the school that you, or the schools that you may seek to attend. So each school will have its own cost of attendance. So this is something that is going to be specific to the school. There's two categories of the cost of attendance. There's direct costs, which are the funds that have to be paid to the college for you to register for classes or for you to get a dorm room on campus and a meal plan. So that's tuition and fees and room and board. And those are monies that, again, are paid directly to the college. The other part are the indirect costs that are included in the cost of attendance, or other costs that are actually or may be incurred by the scholar during the school year, but they are also necessary costs that you want to be prepared to have money available to cover, like books, personal expenses, and transportation costs. And these aren't costs that have to be paid to the school, but these are costs that will vary for each student, depending on the classes, depending on where you are coming from, and depending on your own personal needs. And these are, in a sense, spending money costs while you're in school. Next slide. So understanding and actually, I'm going to step back. I sort of jumped in. I actually do want to find out who is with us tonight. So we said we're focusing on the late stage, which is 8th grade through the 12th grade. In the chat, could you type in what grade you or your scholar is in, so we'll know who's here tonight, so I can sort of see how many seniors we have and how many people have a little bit more time to prepare for this process. So coming back, so understanding the cost of attendance, let's give you some perspective. The cost of attendance varies widely depending on the school. Even within categories of public schools versus private schools, the cost of attendance can have a significant range. But generally, the cost of a public in-state two-year school, a community college, would be about $18,500. The cost of a four-year public in-state school would be now about $26,500. And if you're going out of your state but attending a state public school, the average cost there is about $43,000. And for a private, nonprofit four-year school, regardless of what state it's in, the cost is, or what state you live in, the cost is the same. And that average cost is about $54,000. So again, it can vary widely. For example, UVA in Virginia is a public in-state school, and its average cost of attendance is around $32,000 versus the 26, while a Virginia State University public school average cost, I believe, is around $24,000. So again, it varies. Same with the private schools. I see private schools that are upwards of $70,000 to $80,000 of cost of attendance, and others where the cost of attendance is more similar to a public out-of-state school. So the most important point is there are over 4,000 universities across the United States. So you have choice, and you can still, having choice, choose schools that fit you, that are also affordable for your families, okay? Or affordable for you if you're paying the cost yourself. You want to choose a range of schools that actually meet your financial needs and ability to cover the cost. Next slide. So the other thing that can contribute to cost that is very important, and it can actually create a more of a widening between the cost of a public in-state school and a private school, where a lot of times when I'm working with parents initially, they are reticent to allow their student to even look at private schools because they look at the cost of attendance or the sticker price and they immediately say, we can't afford that, you can't look at, you know, don't put any of those schools on your list, you only need to look at public in-state schools. So I challenge parents and scholars to understand your numbers before you do that. And part of understanding your numbers is understanding that time can contribute to cost. If the public school is one that has a low rate of graduating students in 4 years, then you may need to plan for your student to not get their degree for another year or two, which adds to the total cost of that degree. And so you really do want to look at graduation rates when you are researching the colleges that you're thinking you might be interested in going to. Public schools have less of an incentive to meet higher rates of graduation in 4 years because technically most students don't transfer. And once you're on the campus, your goal is to finish that school. And so you're sort of, they feel like they have you locked in until you finish. Private schools actually use time and getting you out in 4 years, which is why their rates are higher, as a measure to compete against each other for getting those top students. So they're going to be encouraging you and supporting you a little bit more than a public school would to get your degree done in 4 years. All right. So what is your plan to pay for college? So in the chat, please tell us, yes, you have a plan, or I'm working on it, or no, I'm just starting. So this is my starting point. All right. So you can get a sense of where you are with planning for funding college. The one thing that I see is families focus so much on getting admitted, you know, their student being able to be a quality student so that you can get admitted to a college, and actually funding the cost is an afterthought when you're in your senior year and the financial aid forms get released. It is very important that you, as soon as you can, and it's okay if you are that senior going in and you haven't started yet, but as soon as you can, it makes sense to put together a plan. And in saying that, I do want to offer for anyone attending the workshop, I do free initial consultations. So beyond the information that you might get from this presentation or the book, if you do want some assistance in getting kickstarted with the planning process, then you can just email me and request an initial consultation, and that information will be provided later. So let's talk about how do you plan. So first, you want to understand, all right, what are the ways that I can pay for college? What are the resources? So what are your resources is the first thing you want to think about. For out-of-pocket expenses, is there extra income, so discretionary income beyond the bills being paid in the household that the family has to be able to set aside to save or pay out as the student is actually matriculating in college? The other thing is, have you already started a college savings plan? So if you're familiar with a 529 plan, that is a college savings plan that helps you to be tax efficient with saving for college, because once the money goes in, it grows tax-free, and as long as it's used for college expenses, then there is no tax on that growth. So that's a type of college savings plan. Permanent life insurance is another type, way, or place that families can save. The other good thing about permanent life insurance, and that's when you're saving into the cash value. Permanent means that you have this policy in a sense for life and you can build cash value. versus a term insurance policy, which is only for a death benefit. There's no cash value bill. So if you have a permanent life insurance, you bill cash value, and that cash value is not reportable, or they don't require you to report that cash value on the financial aid forms. So that helps to keep your expected out-of-pocket expenses lower, okay? So that's another place where you can save money and access those funds when your scholar is in school, and in a tax-free way. And the last resource, or another resource, is your retirement plan. I never recommend using retirement resources to pay for college. So college savings plans are for college, retirement savings plans are for retirement. If you know that you're going to need funds to help pay for college, then lower your retirement savings maybe, and save those funds in a college savings plan. But don't, it's very costly to use funds out of a retirement plan, especially if the parent is under 59 and a half. Next slide. So outside sources are financial aid, which I talked about, the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Those are the applications that you would complete. Student loans is a part of financial aid generally. So the federal student loans are part of financial aid. That's the direct student loan program, Stafford loan program. Work study is also a part of financial aid, and work study is a source. Just like if you had a regular job, it would help you create pocket money for while you're in school, but it's not money that actually applies towards your tuition and fees and room and board. Scholarships is free money. Grants is also free money, and typically you have to show a need basis in order to qualify for grants. Fellowships and education expense reimbursement are typically things that you apply for, and it depends on your parent or your employer for the scholar whether you can get an education expense reimbursement. Next. Okay, so applying for financial aid, the federal government awards over $120 billion to millions of students each year. As I mentioned before, what are types of financial aid? Student loans, work study, scholarships, grants, fellowships, which are typically for students who are either seniors or in graduate school, or going to graduate school, and then employer education reimbursements. Actually, are not part of the financial award through the FAFSA process, but it is something that can be considered as covering your need if an employer covers some or reimburses educational expenses. Next slide. Okay, so as I was going through before, the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. This is going to be, I'd say, the most important application, aid application that you're going to complete, and you're going to want it to complete it as accurately as possible. There is no cost to complete the FAFSA, and you go, most people, and I'd say 98% of students who are completing the FAFSA, they're doing it online now. And it's much easier, and it helps you to figure out whether you've done something wrong and correct it if you're doing it online. So you would go to fafsa.ed.gov. Make sure you go to the right site. Any site that has you paying to complete the FAFSA is not the right site, okay? You're going to need certain reference documents, tax forms to be able to show your income, bank statements to be able to show assets, and other asset types of statements. The FAFSA and the CSS profile that I mentioned before are released October 1st of each year prior to the student's college academic year, okay? So for The seniors now, you will not be able to start completing the FAFSA until October 1st. So if you've gone in already to the FAFSA.ed.gov and started completing something, you're completing it for the 2020-2021 school year, and you don't want to be doing that, okay? Wait till October 1st. Seniors, what you want to do is apply as soon as possible before the college's priority filing deadline. All right, really there is no actual deadline for completing the FAFSA. Well, there is a deadline. So like for the students going in as a freshman, the deadline for doing the FAFSA is within the year that they're matriculating. But every school, for priority consideration for aid, has a priority filing deadline, okay? And that is going to be listed in the financial aid section of their website, and you want to look at due dates or deadlines for financial aid. Typically, you want to look at the deadline associated with the way you're applying to the school. So if you're applying early decision, there is a financial aid application deadline for early decision students. Early application, there is a deadline associated with them, and then general or regular admissions applications, there's a deadline associated. I always say make sure to get it in by the earliest priority deadline that applies to your application, if not sooner. But you do want to complete it or make sure you understand what might the outcome be before you complete the aid application form. So let's move forward. Next slide. Okay, so the base year is the year that the FAFSA is going to be looking at for income taxes for your financial aid application. So for seniors, the base year is 2019 for the upcoming seniors. So this is for last year's seniors. So our seniors on the line now were juniors. So you're going to be completing the October 2020 FAFSA for the 2021-22 academic year. And so your base year tax return is going to be the 2019 tax returns, which for most people, they were already filed and completed. Next slide. So what does the FAFSA actually calculate? The FAFSA calculates your expected family contribution. And every time I go over expected family contribution, I want scholars and their parents to be thinking my money. So I just want you to type into the chat, my money, okay? The expected family contribution is what the algorithms that are within the FAFSA form determine based on how you enter the information, determine what the Department of Education feels as though you can pay towards your scholar's education, okay? So, but it's not the total out-of-pocket cost, but at least your starting point. So if your expected family contribution or your EFC, your money, right, ends up being $20,000, which will show up as a number, it will be 20000 without a dollar sign in front of it on your confirmation letter or screen after you complete the FAFSA. That is the amount that they expect you can pay for 1 year of your scholar's education, okay? There are 7 elements of involved in calculating your EFC. Those are the parent's income. This is why they want you to have your taxes available or include your tax transcript so they can pull your actual income. The number of people in the scholar's household, the number of scholars in college, scholar income, which again, if the scholar has income from 2019, if you're a senior, then you're going to report that. So scholar income can count. Parent assets and the age of the oldest parent, okay, because there's an asset protection allowance for parents, and then scholar assets. There is no asset protection allowance for scholars. Next slide. What you could do to get an idea of your EFC, you can go to one of these websites and to get an estimate yourself. Again, you can take me up on the free consultation. I do during the initial consultation, I will calculate your expected, an estimate of your expected family contribution and help you to understand that number. Next slide. All right, so determining your financial need, there are 3 basic formulas that you need to understand, and I've gone through a couple of elements of these to help you to have a grasp of these formulas already. So need is money that the school or the federal government can help you to pay for the scholar's year of college, okay? And that is calculated by taking the school's cost of attendance, subtracting your expected family contribution, and then that shows whether you have need or not. If that's a negative number, then you have no need. If it's a positive number, then you have need, okay? And the school can meet up to 100% of the need. Now recognize, not every school meets 100% of the need, and so that's why we have Formula 2. So Formula 2 is the cost of attendance minus your expected family contribution, what your money, minus the aid that actually is awarded by the school to you, which would, again, include student loans, work study, scholarships, and or grants. If there is money left over still to be paid of the cost of attendance, then that is unmet need. Who pays unmet need? You do, okay? So Formula 3 gets to your total out-of-pocket cost, which is the expected family contribution plus the unmet need that you calculate is your total out-of-pocket cost. Next slide. So let's look at an example, and then we'll give you some jewels on how to come up with this out-of-pocket money you need. All right. So if we take, for example, a school whose cost of attendance is $56,000, and your expected family contribution is really low, okay? So there's not a lot of income in the family and not a lot of assets that have counted. So your EFC is $2,000. Then your need is $54,000. All right, if we go to Formula 2, we take the $56,000 minus what you can, they determine you can pay, and then they awarded you $51,000 worth of aid, which was pretty generous, but it wasn't 100%. Okay, so that means there is 2,490 that is still unmet from the school awarding you aid. All right, so we're going to take that 2,490 of unmet need plus the 2,000 of expected family contribution, add those two together, and that would be the cost for your scholar for 1 year of college. Okay. And so it is very important that, and why is planning important? Because you need to know what that number might look like so you can start figuring out what resources you're going to need to tap into or find, how much scholarship money you might need to apply for or try to obtain to help you to pay for that $4,490, okay? If the funds aren't currently available, they may be available. What are the most efficient ways and resources to use and how to use them? So that's what planning will help you with, and understanding that that might be your cost every year for the next 4 years, and how do you keep accomplishing that? So with that, I will turn the mic or pass the mic to Dr. Murray so that she can help you to start thinking and planning for getting free money.
All right. Thank you, Nicole, for such a very informative and insightful discussion on college funding. I appreciate you walking everyone through how do you go about applying for financial aid, how do you determine your expected family contribution, and ultimately, what's your total out-of-pocket cost. Anytime you have to pay costs to the university or to a college, we want to work with you to try to find gift aid or free money that you do not have to pay back. So I talk to students quite a bit about how to find scholarships to cover the rest of those costs. So today I want to share with you some practical tools that will help you to search for scholarships and also to apply for scholarships. Nicole mentioned it already. It's very important to have a plan about, yes, even finding scholarships. You don't want to just go into it blindly without being deliberate and strategic about how to use your time and effort and to target things that you're more likely to get selected for. So please have a plan, get organized, and I'll talk a little bit about some of that in the conversation. One of the things I want to share off the top is when it comes down to scholarships, please target all different dollar amounts of scholarships. It's great if you can get $50,000 worth of scholarships or $10,000 worth of scholarships. But there are some organizations who offer $500, $1,000, $1,500 and on up in scholarship funding. Don't turn your nose up to any amount of money because money adds up. Also, as you think about where to look for scholarships, consider local, state, and national scholarships. And what I mean by that is local organizations right in your everyday community that you may not be aware of have scholarships. Many have foundations, charitable arms, etc., funding to give away. And many times those local organizations in particular don't have enough students to apply. So if you have local scholarships and not many students are applying for it, if you did apply, how might that increase your odds of actually getting awarded a scholarship or selected for a scholarship? It's going to increase your probability substantially, particularly as you follow their instructions as they've asked you to, provided all the necessary information, and you do it by their deadlines. You have a really good shot of getting local scholarships. Also, I want to share that you don't want to limit which organizations that you apply for scholarships. Many colleges and universities have military service scholarships and or ROTC scholarship programs that will pay your tuition, sometimes room and board, possibly even give students a stipend to go to school or stipend while they're in school and other benefits. So consider an ROTC scholarship, for example, as a means to get additional funding. And not only that, if you're thinking about having a career, a military career, but you want to also go to college, this is a great option for you if you meet their eligibility requirements, because not only can you get your tuition paid with an ROTC scholarship, but you also will likely graduate from college as a military officer. So you're going in with rank, you're going in with leadership after you graduate from school, and you very well could have a set job once you graduate from college. So that's a good option. Many organizations have scholarships. You have to really, if I were to give you any advice in this area, think outside the box when it comes to looking for free money, gift aid. You want to target associations in your profession. I went to school for engineering. There's tons of engineering professional associations who are giving out money. If your parents are affiliated with certain professional organizations, some of those entities only give scholarships out to those who are students who are affiliated with their members. So if your mother is a member of, I don't know, the Project Management Institute, and they're giving out a scholarship, for example, then that's an opportunity. They may give it out for students whose parents are members. So take advantage of any of those, whether it's for-profit organizations and companies. People like big corporations have scholarships, technology companies, you name it. Also, nonprofit organizations, whether they're local in your community, sororities and fraternities, for example. And I mentioned here Greek organizations, religious organizations, and I'm not particularly specifying a particular denomination or affiliation in terms of religious organization, but there's a lot of religious organizations in your community who also have funding. And we talked about it earlier in terms of another source of scholarships and financial aid would be employers through scholarships and other reimbursement, employer reimbursement programs. Now, there are different type of scholarships. Put in the chat, I'm going to throw out a true or false question for you guys. True or false? Only students with high grade point averages and high test scores can get scholarships. Send me a note in the chat function if you think that's true or false. You have to have good high GPAs or a high SAT, ACT test scores. Those are the only folks who get scholarships. True or false? All right, I'm seeing a lot of falses, not trues. Thanks, Carol. False. Vivian says it's not true. So I appreciate that. That answer is false. There are scholarships, and I consider those where you have to have a high GPA and or SAT and ACT test scores as being considered academic or merit scholarships. But there's all kinds of scholarships. It could be based on your financial need. It could be based on your interest. If you like to play the violin, if you're a student who's passionate about performing arts, if you are a STEM student, there are many organizations who are looking for STEM students to give scholarships to. As you're thinking about your majors, do an exercise and go out and Google and see what kind of scholarships entities are given based on your major. STEM students in particular, I'll just put a plug in there. There are more scholarships and more money. I'm not saying more than other professions, but I'm saying there's a plethora of money for STEM students because a lot of students don't want to pursue math and science, or they think math is difficult, so they don't necessarily have an interest in pursuing majors where it's, you know, a high amount of math courses, for example. Don't rule those out. Also, I talked about there's military scholarships and there's also athletic scholarships. Type in the chat if you're planning on playing a sport. If you're planning on playing a sport in college on the collegiate level, tell me which sport you're playing. But even academic scholarships, if you are an athlete, I would encourage you to visit the NCAA Eligibility Center because they have their entire set of criteria and requirements that you have to meet. And you really need to start looking at that this summer if you're a senior, and absolutely if you are a junior, get ahead of the game and understand what their requirements are. Okay, I see Cassandra, basketball. Okay, someone's Sharice's son, he runs track. Tijuana looks like baseball. So we have a lot of students who may be considering collegiate sports. So don't rule those out as covering part or all of your scholarship or cost of attendance needs. Each scholarship has its own eligibility requirements and its own set of award amounts and the number of awards they'll make and the deadlines for when they're likely to close their application process. So as you are searching for scholarships, one of the common questions I get asked a lot is, where do I find scholarships? And before I get into this list, I'm going to pick up my trusty phone and say the benefit of this generation, and I call your generation the screen ager generation, because many of you have mobile devices. And with these, you can absolutely Google scholarships. Now, it may take some time and effort, but here's how I think about time and effort when it comes down to the cost of college and attendance. Either you put it in at the beginning, or you're going to pay for it early, or you're going to pay for it later on in the process when you're in college and you're struggling to find funding. So as much as you have time set aside now, I would encourage you to use Google as a great resource to you, but also here on the screen, you'll see a number of entities and websites that have excellent scholarship search capabilities. You can sort, many of them allow you to be able to sort by your major, by the type of school you want to go to, and your interest, for example. You can set up and save a search with particular criteria that's of interest to you. so that those scholarships that you're more likely or more interested to apply for will come to the surface. It could be academic reasons, etc. So take advantage of these sites. Be wary of sites that require you to pay money to use those sites. I don't generally recommend those, though they may be useful. I've heard some positive and some negative things about sites where you have to pay a monthly subscription fee. So investigate those and try to do a little bit of research to see what other people's experiences have been before you commit to a subscription. And also on my website, Invest in Others, I have a complete list. It's not a complete list, but there is a list of over 150 scholarships there categorized that you can also reference to find scholarships. And those are many scholarships I've heard about over time. And also, I mentioned earlier that sororities and fraternities also give out scholarships. I will tell you, many local chapters, the participating AKA chapters that we're here representing and hosting tonight's webinar, we have scholarships. And I'll tell you, I'm on my local chapter scholarship committee. We have very few applications, and sometimes the easiest way to get disqualified from eligibility is not to follow the directions, not to get it in by the deadline, as I talked about earlier. So pay attention to the instructions for each individual scholarship. Please don't make an assumption because you apply to one AKA chapter or one Greek organization's chapter that every other Greek organization under that umbrella has the exact same criteria and eligibility requirements, because they may not. So you really want to read each application and make sure that you're creating a mini checklist for what they're asking you to provide as a part of your package. One of the things that you'll find in the book and workbook that Nicole and I introduced earlier and that we co-wrote is we have a tool in there called, it's a tracking your progress tool. It's a funding and scholarship tracking. It's just a simple spreadsheet. But here, I think it's important when I talk about getting organized to be able to say, these are the scholarships I'm interested in. Here's a link to the applications pretty quickly so you can get back to them when you need them. And any other eligibility requirements, how much money they're offering, etc. But have a simple place to document the things that you're finding as a part of your search, so that as you get ready to sit down and apply for scholarships, you'll have those scholarships and the links to those to refer back to, and you'll know exactly what requirements they have so you can better plan. Now I want to shift to talk about applying for scholarships. So now that you've gotten some tools to search for scholarships, let's talk about applying for scholarships. Scholarships are kind of like college applications, but they're different. You're not asking to get admitted into a university. You're selling yourself, you're putting your best self forward to get selected for money, for scholarships. So there's different parts. You have your financial documents. If it's a need-based scholarship, for example, they may ask you to provide your student aid report after you fill out the FAFSA, or they may ask you for your parents' tax documents and other documents. There's your SAT and ACT scores, your transcripts or information about your grade point average, particularly for merit-based scholarships. College acceptance verification. Some scholarship entities, and I think this is important, will likely ask you to verify that you're actually going to college. So whether it's your acceptance letter, maybe it's an enrollment letter, some form of documentation may be requested. Essays, some scholarships, not all, require essays. Letters of recommendation may also be required. And some may ask you about your activities and interests. And one of the things I'm going to mention in just a minute is a scholar profile. This is really just a one-page resume, but it could help you to differentiate yourself. So I'm going to talk about some of these parts of the application because I think they're very important. I'm going to start with the SAT and ACT. We did a webinar last week in much more detail on this topic, but I want to introduce it to you again just to say that your SAT and ACT scores can be used by entities who are giving out money. It can be used by colleges and universities. It can also be used by local, state, for-profit, not-for-profit organizations. They may request those. How many of you juniors and seniors, hit me up in the chat if you've already taken the SAT, and if you haven't, let me know if you're registered to take the test soon. Even though, and we didn't talk about this a lot, but with COVID-19 and the reality of COVID-19, some colleges are waiving and making the SAT and ACT test optional for students to get admitted. However, in some cases, they're still using those scores if you want merit scholarships. So thank you, LaShonda, for letting me know you are registered. Excellent to see. So keep in mind that if you're looking at researching schools and they say, oh, you don't have to have the SAT to get admitted, do a little bit more research to find out if they're still using SAT and or ACT scores for merit scholarships. The higher your scores, the more likely you may be to meet their eligibility criteria for merit-based scholarship. And here, I'm not going to get into a lot of details, but I will say that these are some of the common costs, and they may have gone up slightly. But the cost for the test are, you should definitely check the College Board and the ACT websites to figure out how much the test costs. And here I'm also including the links for those, and also the SAT test dates. I'm not going to get into a lot of details, but I did want to share with you that there are some dates coming up at the end of August all the way through June of next year are already planned for the SAT. And the ACT has dates that they're starting to plug in for the fall as well. And both of these entities, the SAT and ACT, are considering digital remote testing due to the realities of COVID-19. Next, I want to talk a little bit about transcripts. Scholarship entities may also ask you for your transcripts. With COVID-19 being our current situation, some of you students may be going to school virtually in the fall, and some of you may be going face-to-face. But in both situations, I would encourage you to find out what the process is to obtain your transcripts, because colleges will need them for admissions, but scholarship entities will also, they may want to see your transcripts as proof of your grades and your academic performance. So make sure you get with your school counselors as early as possible before school starts or after school starts to get that information. And please know that they may charge you a fee. Don't wait till the last minute. Let's say you have a scholarship deadline coming up at the end of August. Don't wait until August 20th to find out the process or request your transcripts, because some entities want your entire package there by the date they're requesting their deadline, and others may have flexibility, but you need to read their instructions to find out. But you certainly want to make sure that you give yourself time for your high school to get your transcripts sent in enough time. One of the reasons why I talk about essays and letters of recommendation for scholarships is because sometimes parents and scholars make the assumption that you only have to think about essays and letters of recommendation with college admissions when you're trying to apply to colleges. But as I've already stated, scholarship entities may also ask for essays and letters of recommendation. So as you're thinking about who will write a letter of recommendation for you and what type of essays will I write for myself, you need to think about them in two contexts. College admissions is really about why are you a good candidate for admission into my college? So that essay and letter looks certainly different from one for a scholarship, where they may be asking a different question. Why should we award you a scholarship? And so you'll need individuals who can speak to both of those, and so will your essays that you're writing. So I'll talk about essays first. When it comes to college funding and finding a way to address your unmet need and your total out-of-pocket expenses, the essay, for those entities that require an essay, and not all entities do, but for those who do, it could be the most single differentiator for you. Essays, generally, I see two different categories. There's some scholars who are absolutely on top of it, and they're absolutely trying to get their scholarships essays written. And then there's other scholars who decide, I don't really like writing essays, so I'm going to skip over this scholarship. Don't run from scholarships. When you get a scholarship application, I mentioned, follow the directions. If they say they want an essay and they say they want it handwritten, many don't these days specify that. But if they do, handwrite it. If they say they want it typed, type it. But make sure you stay within your specific word count. If they say no more than 500 words, use your word processor. Don't give them 501. That may be an easy way to disqualify you if the competition is tight. You don't want to give anybody an easy way to disqualify you. Draft your essays early. No time like this summer, rising seniors and even juniors. But if you are a rising senior and you know that there are some general essay topics as you're doing your scholarship and college research that you're seeing a theme on, start writing essays. Write on different topics, save all of them because you'll be able to reuse some of that content. Next, I'll talk a little bit about letters of recommendation. Make a list of, start thinking now as a junior and a senior, who could write letters of recommendation for me? Both letters for college admission and letters for scholarships. Ask them early, give them enough information and enough time to be able to write a good quality letter for you. Provide them with the scholar profile, that one-page resume I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to talk a little bit about. And if you are really on top of your game, pre-draft a letter of recommendation for them to tailor. And it could go something like this. Hi, Miss Christie. My name is Lashandra. I'm going to use you as an example since I saw your name on the chat. I'm a high school senior, and I had you as an English teacher. Here's my scholar profile. I was wondering if you would be willing to write a letter of recommendation for my college admissions. And a separate letter, or a different person, you could ask for a scholarship letter of recommendation. And by the way, I pre-drafted a sample letter of recommendation that includes some information about me, and I'm happy to email it to you so that you can tailor it to your particular style. What's the likelihood that that English teacher would likely write a letter of recommendation? High likelihood or low? Put it in the chat. Thank you. It's very likely. There's a high likelihood. So help yourself and help people who may be willing to help you by saving them some time anywhere you can in the process. And make sure you say thank you to them. Now, I've talked a lot about this scholar profile. There's a template also in our book that we talk about. But this, if you have a scholarship application and they don't specify, if they say only provide the material we ask, please don't give them anything else. But if they go silent and they will accept additional supporting documentation, provide a scholar profile. It's a one-page resume. It has your name, your contact information. I would encourage you to include some of these areas you see listed here. What do you want to major in? What college are you thinking about going to? What's your educational summary in terms of your grades, SAT scores? Put it all in one concise one-page resume, and include if you worked, if you have honors and awards, etc. Here's why. Because this will give you an opportunity to answer questions about you that they might not have seen anywhere else in your application package. I used this with my niece who ended up getting a scholarship to Hampton University years ago for the first time, and it absolutely differentiated her from her competition. So as I approach the end of my talk, I do want to leave you with a few things. Start looking for scholarships early. Regardless of what year you are in high school, save those scholarships on your tracking list. You can always go back to those links and apply as you get closer. Do know that you do not have to be a high school senior to even apply for scholarships. As you're searching, some scholarships will say that they are accepting and they're willing to award scholarships earlier than your senior year. Differentiate yourself any way you can. Find you a scholarship mentor. So if you're interested in applying for a scholarship and you know someone, or you can find out someone who's received that same scholarship before, ask them, friend them, reach out to them and say, hey, I noticed you received the scholarship. Please share with me how you went about your application package. How did you write your letter of how did you write your essay? And they'll be happy to share with you some winning tips for that. Also, make sure that you keep applying. Don't get discouraged if some entities say yes, thank you for applying, but we've moved in a different direction or we've selected someone else, somewhere else. Continue to apply for scholarships while you're in high school and as you matriculate in college. There's no hard and fast rule that says you can't continue to get scholarships while you're in college. And lastly, on this one, to this point, save your username and password for all these scholarships. A lot of these systems now have portals where they want you to log in. Save your username and passwords in one central place so that you and your parents can access them as you may need to. It'll keep you from going insane. And in my last few minutes, I just want to circle back around and say, please use your time wisely. In our college funding book, toward the back of the book, we have many steps, many things that high school juniors and seniors should be doing to get ready for college and certainly to find money. But there's a correlation between the colleges you pick, how much they cost, and how much money you'll need to go to college. So you can't just focus on funding. You can't just focus on college admissions. You got to think about this holistically, because as Nicole mentioned earlier, go where you can afford and think about those costs in the midst of selecting and narrowing down your schools. But take advantage of your time this summer. Start researching schools, looking for scholarships. As Nicole mentioned, do you have a college funding plan? Should you be saving differently right now? If you haven't started to build a scholar profile, I would encourage you to do so, even as a high school junior, and then you can update it next summer and you're well on your way as you become. Start thinking about who can write letters for you and start thinking about where you can get money. If you are a senior, I would say that time is absolutely of the essence. Make sure that you are narrowing down your colleges and that you understand how to get your transcripts when you need them, both for college admissions and scholarships. Start writing your essays in particular. And don't forget that October 1st date for when the free application for federal student aid opens up. You want to have your tax and other financial documents already set aside so that you're able to fill out that information with ease, and continue to apply for college admissions this fall and scholarships. There's no reason why you can't start looking and applying for scholarships now. Some of those scholarships I talked about in different categories, like ROTC scholarships, they have deadlines as early as September. So don't think that you got to apply for college and then wait until December or January to start looking for money, because many entities are giving out their money on different timelines. So you may actually be ahead of the game by doing it this fall. Some students may not think to apply this fall, and by the time they think to apply, their deadline may have passed, which gives you an advantage. So with that being said, I will say to you, this is an important time in your lives. The more you're able to plan and to think and be deliberate about how you're going to find the funding and how much funding you need, the better off you'll be. We'll talk more about essays and letters of recommendations on how they can help support you with your scholarship applications in a future webinar. So with that being said, I thank you very much for your time and attendance, and I will turn it over to Lakita for closing remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Christie Murray and Ms. Nicole Cole, for an awesome presentation on college funding. The wealth of information shared, I'm sure, will assist our parents and scholars that are on the webinar tonight in preparing for their next stage of their education. Parents and scholars, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I encourage you all to please begin your research and apply all of the information that was shared on this evening. Our question and answer session will occur next. If you have not had an opportunity, please go ahead and post your questions in the chat section so that our presenters can answer your questions. We have 3 remaining sessions in our summer webinar series. August 20th, we have essay writing and getting letters of recommendation. August 27th, we have applying to colleges, strategies for high school seniors, and juniors are also welcome on the session. And September 24th, we have our general college and HBCU information I wish someone had told me. Please go ahead and register for our upcoming sessions as soon as you have an opportunity because spaces are limited and our sessions are filling up quickly. Next slide. Your feedback is very important to us. In the comment section, in just a moment, you'll see a link to our survey. We are asking all of our participants to please complete the survey so that we can receive some feedback on how we're doing with the webinars. You will also receive this link to the survey along with presentation slides and some resources in an email immediately after the webinar ends. Next slide. The books you see before you are the awesome reference books that have been pretty much the foundation of our summer webinar series. The first book, College Planning Strategies, I Wish Someone Had Told Me, written by Dr. Christie Murray, and College Funding Strategies, I Wish Someone Had Told Me, written by Dr. Christie and Miss Nicole. Both books also have a workbook to accompany them. These two books are a great resource to assist with your college planning and college funding process. If you would like to purchase these very affordable resources, please visit either of the websites that are listed, www.investinothers.com and www.thecollegemoneyteam.com. Next slide. Listed on this slide are useful links that are available for you to utilize. You have the SAT and ACT prep websites, the EFC calculator, the FAFSA websites, and both emails and links to both of our presenters. So we encourage you to please use this really useful information. And this slide will also be included in the email that you receive immediately after the session. Please follow our presenters on their social media platforms. Follow the College Money Lady and follow the Scholarship Expert. And listed on the slide are their handles for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and both of their emails. Again, thank you all for joining us this evening, and I'll now turn it over to Ms. Karen and Ms. Cassandra to moderate our question and answer session.
Thank you so much, Ms. James. So for our first question for this evening goes to Dr. Chambliss. You mentioned that some organizations do not share enough, do not receive applications from enough qualified students. Is this common for those organizations to reopen or extend their deadlines for their applicants?
Thank you for the question. I would say that is not typically common. You can always check. There may be some extenuating circumstances where an organization would. I know that over the past 6 months, due to COVID-19 and this pandemic, many organizations have extended their scholarship deadlines. But outside of this pandemic situation, I would say it's probably on a case-by-case basis. And I did see an earlier question about local scholarships in local communities. And someone asked if I could give an example. Your local NAACP organization, your local fraternities and sororities, your local Jack and Jill organization, your local Boys and Girls Club. So there's a lot of local organizations right in your community who are looking for deserving students and scholars to give funding to. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Murray. We did have a question. It was addressed very briefly, but I did want to push this question back out to Ms. Nicole Cole. And that question was, you mentioned the permanent life insurance as a household source for paying for college. There was a question about whether that permanent life insurance was the same as whole life insurance. And can you just kind of discuss that a little more in detail, please?
Yes. Permanent life insurance, actually, there are two types of permanent life insurance. There's whole life, yes, as well as universal life. And so that's why it's really important if you're actually considering other tools or other assets to help you to save, protect yourself, or pay for college, you understand which type of life insurance makes sense for your family and what you're trying to accomplish. A whole life policy generally might have a higher premium for the same amount of death benefit, but that also means that it would have cash value available sooner and possibly more available earlier in the policy versus a universal life policy might have a lower premium for the same amount of face value or death benefit, but be more affordable for the family. And if you have more time to build a cash value, that might actually make more sense. So it really depends on your situation. So definitely make sure you work with I say when you do college funding planning, you can't just work with an insurance professional. You want to work with an insurance professional that understands what you're trying to accomplish for college, because a lot of financial advisors as well as insurance professionals have no idea what this financial aid process and is about and how it might impact your need basis.
And then the final question, you all discussed, and Ms. Nicole Cole, you definitely hit on a lot about the financial aid, the FAFSA form, and you talked about some of those equations that equal up to the EFC. Oftentimes we have parents or families that feel like they make too much money going into the process, so they don't really see a benefit. Should families fill out that FAFSA even though they feel like they make more than they would be able to qualify in that aid?
I'm so glad that you brought that up. You should always fill out the FAFSA. It's not going to hurt you to fill out the FAFSA because you might get need-based aid for one of the more expensive schools that your student applies to, but you might not get it for one of the less costly schools. And if you didn't fill out the FAFSA, assuming you weren't going to qualify for aid, then you wouldn't get it for the more expensive school. That's one reason. Another reason is because you never know how your situation is going to change after you complete the FAFSA, before the school year starts or even during the school year that your student is matriculating in college. And if something changes about your household situation, you lose a job, there's a medical spend or illness, those are generally two of the main things that I see. Someone loses a job or changes a job or starts a business or something like that, and now your financial situation has changed, and so you want to talk to financial aid to say, all right, now I don't have this money that you expected me to have to pay for school. How can you help me? And the first thing that they're going to do is go back and look to see if you filed a FAFSA. And then you talk about, okay, how that FAFSA and what you filed has changed so that they can potentially create some resources. If you haven't filed, now you're going to have to wait, potentially pay for school or find some money before they are able to help you, if they're able to help you. So those are two reasons. The other thing that I would say is there are three categories of families. There's a category one. They're going to probably qualify for the most amount of need-based money. Their expected family contribution is going to be really low. Category two usually are middle-class families. They're going to have some EFC. There's going to be some out-of-pocket costs expected, but they're also going to have some need. And then there's category three that for the schools that their student is looking to go to, they don't show any need. Now, in order for that student to receive merit-based money that doesn't require need, the schools still require you to have a FAFSA on file or a CSS profile on file. And so you may likely take your student out of the running for receiving merit-based grade based on their grades, their SAT, their talent, their sport, if you don't fill out the financial aid forms. So those are all reasons why, hey, fill out the FAFSA. It doesn't cost you anything. So just do it.
And I'd like to add and reiterate something I think Nicole touched on in her presentation, but I want to circle back around for you, Nicole. Students should apply for their FAFSA, financial aid, each academic year.
They have
not
to.
Just one time, just because you're a rising freshman in the college, you're graduating from high school and you're starting college. But each year while you're in college, you have to apply for your FAFSA. And my second point, Nicole, and I'd like for you to expand on it. The deadline to apply for the FAFSA, is it based on the college's deadline or the FAFSA, the government deadline?
So the latest deadline is based on the government, okay, now, which is like the next April, okay, after your student is already in school. So that's the latest one. Don't pay any attention to that one. The deadlines, and that's why I kept saying priority deadline for consideration for aid is set by the school, okay, because there's two types of aids. There's federal aid and there's institutional aid. And I see the question in the chat on what's the difference between the FAFSA and the CSS profile. The FAFSA is the application for federal aid that is calculated or created by the Department of Education. Now, in order to qualify for student loans or Pell Grants or any federal aid, you have to complete the FAFSA. And that's another reason to complete the FAFSA. Every student, regardless of whether you have need, only gets the student loan if you fill out the FAFSA. So even if you don't have need, a family can get, the student can get the direct student loan, okay? But going back, so the FAFSA was generally intended to be able to help schools award federal aid, but many schools use that same information to award institutional money, okay? Now, there are some schools that have more money beyond the FAFSA, and they have like money from alumni, foundations, endowments, and they want more information. And also they know that, well, the FAFSA might be a little bit strict on what expected family contribution might be, and you might have some special circumstances that they're willing to consider. That's when the school will ask you to complete the CSS profile form, which is an institutional aid application. You will not get a EFC number when you finish that, but it will provide that each individual institution that you send it to information that they need to do a specific customized consideration of your special circumstances and of different criteria that you fill out on that form for institutional money. So that one does cost. It's $25 for the first school that you submit it to and $16 for each additional school. But if the school requires it, it is worth the money to complete it.
Thank you. And I have one last follow-up question. As it pertains to completing your FAFSA and getting your EFC, and what happens if circumstances, you mentioned special circumstances or circumstances changing, can a student appeal their award letter?
Okay, so you do want to call it an appeal, because some people say, can I negotiate? Okay, so yeah, you can negotiate via an appeal. All right, schools do not like to feel like they're being negotiated with. Okay, so yes, after you, typically you complete the FAFSA and or CSS profile. When you get your acceptance to school, what's that? By like April 1st is the acceptance usually. And sometime in April, usually, sometimes earlier. So especially if you're getting merit scholarships, you might get your award letter. Okay, so generally, anytime after you submit your FAFSA and CSS profile up to about April 15th, you should be looking for the award letter. It comes into the student account sometimes and not into your email, or the link into the email. I had one come into my spam folder, okay, or my student's spam folder, and he would have never seen it. But as a parent, I get the logins for my students' emails because they don't pay attention to a lot of this stuff. It's new. So I go and I pay attention because otherwise it's going to be my money, right? So in any case, I say that to say that yes, if when you get the award letter in April, you feel like they didn't meet enough need, they didn't necessarily consider a special circumstance, or something came up since you have filled out the FAFSA that you need to talk to a financial aid counselor about and have them reconsider, that's when you're going to have to make a direct connection. So whether it's email or phone call or visit, when we can visit again, to a financial aid officer to talk about your specific situation, okay? Don't just go in and change the FAFSA and resubmit it and not talk to somebody. But yes, you can appeal. Another thing I will say, Christy, to your scholarship point, after you get the award letter and close to the time frame for making the decision, most schools want the decision May 1st of where you're going to go. You might circle back to either financial aid or admissions and ask, you know, is there any more money or have the student, I always say for this, I have the student ask, is there any more, or the scholar, more money or scholarships that I might qualify for? Because by that point, they may already have some students that have said no, and so then they have more resources and they may throw some more money at you to say yes.
I will also add that to your point, talk to the school of engineering, the school of pharmacy, the school of business. I had a unique situation one time working with my niece who needed some additional money. We walked to the School of Engineering, talked to the dean, and ironically, he had a scholarship. He could hand select the student he gave it to. Wasn't publicized anywhere, wasn't well known. Financial aid office had no clue about that scholarship being in his office, enough to be able to point students, but having that, building relationships with folks and being able to talk. And I like the idea of having the scholar asking questions and really getting involved in the process can make a significant difference. Also, Nicole, you prompted me to mention something else. As students and scholars get scholarships, talk to your financial aid department, because I've had students say, ooh, if I get extra money, can I keep it all? Yes and no. In some instances, the schools will allow you to keep additional funds that have been allocated for you that academic year, and in some cases, they will not. Sometimes they will subtract however much you have in scholarships from the amount of financial aid the school would give you, from the difference between what you had in the scholarship. So I would encourage you, before you get super excited, to ask and find out, and it could be based on different types of scholarships, or that schools, what their requirements are, maybe trying to spread money, among students who really need it the most. But I would invite you to ask and have those questions up front. But there are some situations where you can have an abundance of funding.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Chambliss and Ms. Cole. That was great information. It looks like we have concluded our questions for this evening. And so I do want to take this time to thank you all for attending our college funding and scholarships webinar. We hope that you enjoyed it and gained some valuable information. You will receive an email with some select slides and resources from tonight's webinar. Again, we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar on writing essays and getting letters of recommendations on Thursday, August 20th at 7:00 p.m. Again, thank you, and you all have a good night.